Very excited about today's show. I've got two great guests and actually one more coming. So, looking forward to having everyone on today, and I appreciate having each of you on the show. I want to just kind of go ahead and acknowledge who we have so far. I have the Miss Melanie Marshall. She has commuted all the way from beautiful Australia. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rollis. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I love that this is now international.
I love it. Absolutely. And then at the bottom, we have Miss Melissa Cortez here in the States. But I'm trying to think. Are you in North Carolina? What state are you in again?
Yeah. Yep. North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay. Well, welcome to the show, Melissa.
Hi, Rollis. I'm happy to be here. Hi, Melanie. I'm excited. Melanie's the best. So,
It's all.
Likewise, Melissa, you made this all possible. So thank you for introducing us all and putting us together.
of
That's
course.
right. That's right. You know, it's interesting how this whole thing worked because with the live show, somehow I got introduced to Noelle. And then I think through
Oh,
Noelle, I learned about Melissa. And then through Melissa, I learned about Melanie.
Here we all are.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how it all works. Love it. And hey, look, Joanne says hello as well. Joanne says hello, Melissa and Melanie. So thank you, Joanne. Appreciate it. Those of you who are just now signing in, let us know what city or state that you're signing in from, or country, right? Because we're international. What country you're signing in from? And does this resonate with you? Is this topic important to you? Organizational trust. I mean, obviously, all relationships you have to have trust, but what about developing organizational trust? We're going to talk about what the difference is. What are some ways we can develop it? How can we create healthy teams by having organizational trust? And Melissa, I know you've talked about this in the past on your posts, and you suggested that I have Melanie on the show. And of course, after I visited with Melanie personally, I was like, yeah, we definitely got to have her on the show to talk about this. And actually, you just recently wrote a book about this too, Melanie, right?
I did write a book about this.
Why?
I
Why'd
wrote
you
a
write a book?
I Yeah, well, I wrote a book because I was frustrated. I actually wrote my book in anger because I'd been playing in the organizational culture space for quite some time. I was working in and out of organizations, and the common theme that I was finding was that people weren't being able to come to work and deliver in the way that they could bring their best selves to the table. And what I mean by that is I think organizations employ people because they're bright and they're talented. And somewhere along the way, we can tend to forget that. And I was working in an organization where the mood and the vibe was instantly bad when you walked right in. And the teams were in a state where they were really demotivated. They wanted to do things that improved the way that they worked to better serve their customers, but they just felt that they weren't trusted to do the job, and they weren't because they were being consistently micromanaged. Problems were happening, things were breaking, and instead of them being asked how they could do things differently or what their suggestions were, they were pretty much just constantly always told things. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was just really awful to watch people who had fantastic amounts of experience not being able to use any of it. So that's kind of where it started, and a friend of mine said, you know what, Mel, you should write a book. You should write a book. You should write a book on leadership and management. And I rolled my eyes at that and I went, oh, we don't need another book on leadership and management. And I got really cranky and I said, the thing that annoys me most is that people should be trusting one another. If we trusted one another, we'd actually get better jobs done. And then yeah, that's how the book came about.
and when
Awesome.
I
And
was listening to Melanie tell me this, I was like, this is healthcare. Like, this is exactly what we need. I was like, this is the perfect, bridge right now, especially, as this pandemic has just tore apart the healthcare system in the world, but especially the United States. And I was thinking that for people that are really trying to retain staff and or hire new staff, what are the things that we have to change organizationally, as a culture, healthcare culture? And Melanie is an expert on culture and changing, and I think that she's just such a benefit for anybody who's interested in making a difference in a real tangible way. Like we can't continue to do things the same way anymore.
It's really about connecting with people, right? We talk about human resources and people are assets, but where we get it wrong is that we focus more on the resource and the asset as opposed to the human. So when we learn to connect with one another more deeply and really understand how everyone's experience is valuable, that's where the magic happens.
That's a great point. Okay, so Joanne is saying there's a little bit of a lag. So, Joanne, I'm making some adjustments here. If you're watching it, we're trying to make some adjustments to fix that. If you could explain what the lag is it the audio? Is it the video? Let us know what it is, if you don't mind, in the chat. So, appreciate that. Oh, actually, it was Jonathan who said that. Okay, so as far as give me one or two steps that we could take to start building the bridge of trust. And maybe, Melanie, you could start with that, and then you can add whatever your thoughts are, Melissa.
Well, to start, assume trust can be given. And by giving other people trust first, that's a pretty big key. So that would be the first one, would be provide other people with trust. Don't wait for it. Don't make people earn it. Give people your trust first. And that's probably the hardest one, because quite often you hear, oh, well, trust is earned, and it has to be something that we have to work on. But when you're giving your trust first, that then opens the door. So that would be number one. And the second one is accept that the decision to trust is not yours. It's the other person's. They decide the pace, the time, and whether or not they're going to trust you. So you can offer that, you can offer yourself, you can provide your trust in them, but if that doesn't want to come back, we have to accept that. So that's two things.
That's
What do you
great.
think, Melissa?
I think a lot of times we hire nurses and we are so busy trying to portray the culture or how we do things at this institution, that we don't really give them space to say, like, I know my job, I've been trained in this position, and how do I fit in with your organization, instead of like, you belong now to the organization and you have to do everything the way that we do things. And I think that when you limit people like that, you get rid of innovation. I mean, if you look at Google and the way that big, successful, large tech companies operate, they really do a vertical type of inclusion where everyone meets their objectives and key results. Everybody has a buy-in. And I think a lot of times in healthcare, it's like, well, you're just a warm body. You're just here. You're just doing what we need. You're just here to take care of patients. They don't think about the fact that there's no amount of money now that's going to keep us at the bedside, really, or everyone's going to jump ship and just become trapped. We're trying to avoid that. Then we really need to create a new system. And part of that is trusting your employee and trusting that they're going to do their job, and that they're going to come forward with some sort of buy-in, personal buy-in, and you have to create that environment. I think that's the difficulty, is like, it's not just a job. Nursing is more than just a job. You've got this group of really empathetic people that really love to help people, and you have to understand the person. Like Melanie said, human resources, right? You have to focus on the human and what those people are about and who they are.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't, you're missing out. And that's the thing, you're missing out on a golden opportunity. And when people get so hooked on, fitting within a box, you're missing out on the possibilities of innovation. You're missing out on the possibilities of doing things in a way that may not have been thought of before, that could make your business even better. So organizationally, the business are actually limiting themselves quite significantly by not tapping into the individual experience of the people who they're employing. Because if you think collectively, even just if you can imagine every single person that's listening into this call, and the number of years that they've been on the planet, multiply that. Wow, that's a lot of experience.
Yes, absolutely.
And we don't
Uh,
think about that, So you're missing hundreds and thousands of years potentially of experience if you're constantly going to tell people to just do the same thing or the same way. Sure, there are guidelines and there are ways that things need to be done to meet regulations, but there's always room for that additional element of care.
I think that's where we got that idea of magnet hospitals for nursing. And then it became very trendy and just about getting the title magnet, not really what does magnet mean. So a
I was
lot of
going to ask that. What does magnet mean?
so magnet hospitals are hospitals that are supposed to be more nurse driven, more nurse inclusive, and they have better metrics. They have what's called shared governance, where nurses are able to sit on leadership kind of positions and help kind of more with that vertical. But what happens is they don't actually have any power. So you're empowering people and then micromanaging them. So again, you're not trusting when a nurse says, I've been on my clinical ladder, I'm part of this shared governance group, and allowing the shared governance group to move forward, there isn't any of that. So it really now nursing has kind of magnet status is not, it means nothing to the bedside nurse because you can work at a community hospital where they just all really work together and that's the culture, and they're not magnet because they haven't paid the money to get this certification. And now nurses are seeing, what really is the cost analysis of things. They're really starting to understand the value of their own time, the value of their own resources, and also how much the actual organization is willing to put money out there for different things. So
Well, they're seeing the truth. You're seeing the truth at that operational level, because you can have the best strategy and plan, but it's how that is brought to life that's the difference. And there is always a massive gap generally between the strategy and the plan and what happens in the real world. And when you've got healthcare workers that are on the floor doing the work, they're the ones that will be able to tell the CEOs what is and what isn't working. And if you miss that perspective, if you miss that level of intelligence, there is so much that you are putting at risk. Not only are you risking the bottom line of your organization, but you're risking the health, the well-being, and the safety of the very people and the communities that you're supposed to be serving.
Let me just do this for a technical issue. I'm just going to about a 5-second little break here in our talking. 1 second here. Okay, we should be back here. Yeah, you guys had such a great conversation. I didn't want to I didn't want to stop you, but I wanted to just make that quick little adjustment. Okay, so as far as moving forward, by the way, Marvin came in and said hello. Hello back to you, Marvin. Thanks for coming in. As far as how to mend things and start to build the trust, can we get one? Let's get one action item, just one example, of one action item, because there might be some things that are holding people back from taking that next step. And so if we give them maybe somewhat of an easy step to do first, just to simply start the process, maybe that could help them. So what would you say would be step number one, Melanie, and then Melissa, you can come in and kind of apply it to healthcare as well.
I'd say there are two. One is acknowledging that the trust isn't there, and being real about that. There's no point pretending that it exists if it doesn't. So acknowledging that the trust isn't there and looking to understand why that's the case is really key, because if you don't have that understanding, and if you don't have that willingness to really listen and hear, you're making it about you, and trust is about the other person. So focus on the other person and how you can serve them in the first instance. And then the other one is more about having a powerful question around knowing that what your values are, trying to understand what their values are. Chances are they're very similar or aligned, but they're not being interpreted as similar, or they're not being interpreted as aligned. So try and find out what the other person's values are that are similar or like yours, that you can find a common ground. So why is there distrust? I can see that the value that you want to bring is this. I also want to bring that value. How can the two of us meet halfway? So it's a very personal thing, and I think you've got to be prepared to ask more questions than actually be doing or saying things in the first instance.
Yeah,
That's really
that
good.
sounds hard. But
There
go
is
for it,
It's
Melissa.
hard.
as a manager, previous management experience, my first thought is like, oh my gosh, how vulnerable. So I saw this post yesterday. Rollis, you'll appreciate this. I'm always on, there was a post that said, nursing, the most unprofessional profession. And it really hit home because nurses, like as a from management, I learned management through nursing first and then applied it into other industries and saw how it was done and was like, oh. So I think that there's this degree of vulnerability that you have to have that we are taught in nursing that we're not supposed to have. I think that it's seen as this warped sense of professionalism, like, oh, that's unprofessional. When in reality, if you look at large corporations and corporations that are doing very, very well, they have a high degree of vulnerability and a different concept of professionalism. And they hold each other to that professional standard without really guilting or shaming people. And I think that is really the difference that I see in healthcare from another organization or another type of system. And I think we can look at the airline industry. Southwest has a really good culture. You can look at companies like Equilibria, who are from the oil and high reliability organization industry. Those type of industries, it's time for healthcare leaders to kind of look outwards and kind of see where else they can take pieces of information and knowledge and bring those into their practice, because we are not taught as nurse managers, we're not taught really how to be leaders. They may have some leadership training along the way, but it's usually after you get the position and there's so many things that you're busy doing, tasking, that it's really hard and you don't have a lot of autonomy. So it's like they've
Oh,
given you this false sense of power, and then they're supposed to trust you with the unit, but then you can't really make any changes. And that's where that vertical type of OKR, or that vertical understanding, like you're talking about, Melanie, where everybody has buy-in, everybody's working towards the same goal, that would be really beneficial in the healthcare space.
there is a challenge though, and having worked in and around hospitals for about 7 years before I had a break, um, in the corporate space and also in the ward services space and managing a unit there, the thing that I noticed that is a real challenge is that ability to be vulnerable. And something with healthcare workers is that there's an element where you almost have to hold people at arm's length in order to be very, very good at your jobs. And I see it as a bit of a protective mechanism as well, because you're dealing with illness and death and people who are in these really traumatic spaces every day. And as a human, how do you disconnect from another human in order to do what needs to be done in that moment, whether that's operate on somebody, whether that's doing compressions, whether that's telling somebody really horrible bad news that you would never want to hear yourself,
Right.
as a human. So what makes you really good at your job is also at times something which can really be hard when it comes to being vulnerable yourself in order to trust other people, and particularly your co-workers and your executive.
And that's the conversation that Melanie and I have had, because Melanie has experience in the military as well. And, I think that's the biggest false thing that we've been taught, is to compartmentalize and disconnect. Because in reality, that's what causes PTSD. That's what causes moral distress and moral trauma. And it's funny that the first step that Melanie talks about is also the first step that I always talk about, is acknowledgement. You have to acknowledge that something's happening, that we're here in this together, whatever that this is, and then move through it instead of around it. Because once you start moving around things, then those things grow legs and they start chasing you. And then you've got this unit of nurses that's burnt out and angry and upset, and all these rocks have now grown legs and they're following everyone, and that's a lot of baggage to carry, as opposed to being present and aware and moving through that event. I think that's really, really important. And as a leader, how do you have the tools to teach that and to embody that, and the energy to embody that? And that's something that, like Noelle, who just joined, is an expert in kind of teaching leaders how to dig deep, but also to take care of themselves and move through that, so that there's a new space created in healthcare leadership. And that's kind of what we need. And I think Melanie is a really great bridge between nursing leadership and executive leadership, because that's a big divide that we need to cross.
Well, it's the acknowledgement with the intent to connect. And that's the key, because what you don't want at that operational level is to be seen as, the angry nurses and the workers with the pitchforks, we're angry about this, you don't trust us, hurry up and trust us. But then at the other side, because that's not who you are and that's not your intent. So then on the other end, you've got the executive who want to be able to acknowledge that and connect with you in a way that says, okay, well, how do we work through this together? What are the things that we can co-design, we can connect on? What are the things that we need to clarify around the things that are within our control to shift slowly and gradually over time? Because you're not going to be able to solve all of the problems all at once. So you've really got to understand and get clarity around what's possible here and now, and then how can we gradually improve and keep those improvements continuously occurring, so that we can get to that outcome. Because your visions are all pretty similar and they're all shared. You said something really beautiful before, Melissa, along the lines of healthcare is a calling. It's not just a job. So at that very value-based level, you're already connected for a cause. And somewhere along the way, in your roles, the positions, the busyness of the day, the stress that you're under, you've forgotten what it is around why you joined to begin with. Why have you chosen to take up the call? And Noelle, it's a pleasure to have you on here. And I'm going to hand over to you, because it'd be great to hear your perspective on this also.
Of course, and I'm sorry I'm running a little bit behind, but it sounds like I came in at a really good time as well. And, there's a couple things that come to my mind as I look at my transformation from a bedside nurse to a leadership to an executive leader. And there's one thing that, to keep trust within your organization or your staff, you have to have a certain trait within yourself that you can't lose. And part of that is empathy, right? I think we abuse that word often and not realizing what empathy really means. But it's the connection to the person, to the human on the other end of, whereas if it was sympathetic of like, oh, sorry, that's you. Well, at least that's not my problem. It's, you hear that a lot of like, well, at least I didn't do that, or at least that's not here. Oh, sorry, you have to go through that. that doesn't help the person going through a situation, but to actually take a step back and relate to them and let them know that, again, cliche, we're in this together, but then it's up to us as that leader to show them, what does that really mean and how can we do that? And, you know, I in my current position now, love my team. I love my executive team, my staff. We're all in a position of having those mutual feelings of, we're in this together, but how can we do that? You know, part of our initiative, and I just want to share this, that I think it's helpful when you look at, no matter how small or large the organization is, myself and one of the other executive leaders went around and did our leadership rounding to all staff in all the departments with a memo. And we said, we've got a memo we want you guys to read. This is not an option and you must do it. And they all looked at us like this. And it was, take a break, take a 10-minute break. And once they read it, they started laughing because they thought we were like, oh God, what do they have us doing? And it literally was, take a 10-minute break, put your computer away, get out of the exam room, step outside and take a break, because you may not be able to fix the long-term solution, but what you can do in the moment is release the pop-off valve. If you don't get a chance to release the pop-off valve, it's harder to then continue the next 6, 7, 8 hours of your shift. So, you know, and I did this with my own leadership. It was, you know, times are crazy. And I was like, everyone out back now. And they're like, what's happening? It was beautiful outside. I said, turn around, masks off, face to the sun, close your eyes. Melissa, and I thought of you. I said, count to 5 seconds. They thought it was an eternity. And I said, take a deep breath in and reset. They're like, 5 seconds, 5 seconds. I'm like, shh.
That's really beautiful, Noelle. That's really beautiful.
We all had moments of like sort of tearfulness of, why don't we do this enough? And why don't we practice what we preach? And that again builds trust. You have to understand that we are all humans at the end of it. And if you don't understand that connection and you don't allow them to literally take that time, we're no good. You know, we're not practicing what we're telling them to do, let alone not doing it ourselves. So
there are two things that you've said there that are beautiful, and there were many things, there's multiple things, but the two that really stick with me that are incredibly important, and I talk about them in my book, is, yes, it's about empathy. That's one of the core competencies for trust amongst others. But you've also mentioned the ability to create a third space. So there's an author over here in Australia, Dr. Adam Fraser, and he has a fabulous book called The Third Space, which is about managing the space in between the transitions of all of the tasks that we do during the day. So I really love the way that you created a third space for people, for them to be able to reset and think. The other really powerful thing that we forget to ask is, now that we've connected humans to humans, how are we going to work through the next thing? You know, how are we going to make this even better? And that how question, that's where the co-design element comes in. And if you go to ask how, as an executive, you've got to be prepared to do some of that, right? Because it's not enough to understand and then ask for suggestions. You've then got to be committed to be saying, okay, well, now that I've got this intelligence, now that I've got this understanding, and I've even got the suggestions around what we can do, we're going to commit to this. So this is my commitment, this is your commitment, and that's where we're in this together element comes in.
That's some of the best CNOs and executive leaders, really, and that their reputation really precedes them. Like, one that comes to mind is Mr. Kit Bredemus from Texas. I think he won CNO of the year last year or this year. But he really, I've heard that when he asks for a suggestion and he allows the staff to, put forward, he acts on it. It's not just, oh, well, I should have a suggestion box and then never check the suggestion box. It's like nurses are tremendous innovators. They are, if you want something fixed, ask a nurse. Just ask a doctor, a really experienced doctor. He'll be like, I don't know, my nurse does that.
Well, you've got to act with reliability, right? You can't just do it once. You've got to be reliable. You've got to be consistent in who you are, how you show up, and how you work with others. And if you're not reliable in that, that's never going to work.
And it does take work. I mean, half the calls that we have with CNOs or executives, they're like, are you hiring? Can we work with you? Like, this sounds fun, And I'm like, no, you have to stay where you're at. And they're like, well, we don't want to be here anymore. So you've got this element of people at the top that are very burnt out. Yes. And then they don't want to ask the question because they know that there's going to be stuff that they want to do.
Rollis, do you have a question?
Can I say something? on my round table.
You've been overtaken, Rollis.
What? You were here? You're on this call?
As my dad would say, the cows are mooing.
Okay.
Hang on. Rollis has the talking hand. We
laugh about this because, okay, on our team meetings, right? They'll be talking and going on, and then I'll do that, and they're like, "Yes, Ross, go ahead. What do you have to say?" Because it's the same thing. I just don't know where to cut in. Okay, so I have two questions for you guys. One of them I know is going through people's minds right now is, okay, I want to build trust. I want my boss to trust me, or I want my staff to trust me, but I don't trust them. So how do you work through that? Okay, that's one question. The other question I need you guys to answer for me is, let's say for a moment you could not speak or be heard by leadership and your teams for the whole month except for 1 hour, okay? 1 hour a month for the next 12 months. So it's 12 hours, but it's only over a 12-month period. What would you talk about and who would you talk to? Okay, so who wants to answer that? Either one of those first. You have
Melanie,
to answer both, though.
Answer that one.
This is why we don't let you speak, Rollis. These are very challenging questions. I'm going to let Melanie go first, too, so I can think about this. But
like multi-barreled questions. Give me the last question again.
Okay, the last question is: imagine you're not able to speak or be heard by your staff or your team for an entire month, except for 1 hour. For 1 hour, you'll be totally heard. You'll be able to speak. They'll be able to hear everything you say for that 1 hour. What would you most often speak about, and who would you speak to throughout the year? By the way, I want to also just acknowledge Michelle Rodriguez Belong. She says, loving the dialogue and perspective. So thank you very much for that. So go ahead, Melanie.
I would actually speak less and ask more, because I would have spent all of that time in not speaking, walking around the floor, observing, watching, seeing all of the interactions, feeling the vibe, along with the reports that I'm getting in as an executive, which are giving me the numbers and the facts and the figures. But by walking the floor and really experiencing what other people were experiencing in a more casual format and being visible and just listening and absorbing it in, when I got the opportunity to speak, I would be asking, hey, the other day I observed this. Can you please help me understand why that happens? Can you let me know what is the thing that most irritates you about your job that if I could give you a magic wand, you would want to fix? And how could I support you or enable you to fix that? Because I can see and I can feel that you want to do amazing things. That would be what I would do.
I love that.
That's
great. Love that. And we always say less is more, but how much do we really practice that, right? You'll get more out of that 1 hour than you would talking in meetings for an hour a month for 12 months straight. So bravo. I'm not sure that I can compete with that answer or get something even better than that.
I was really curious to hear how Melanie would answer the first question about like if as a leader you don't trust your team, because I feel like that's happening a lot in healthcare right now.
Yeah.
You've got travelers, you've got tons of people in here. Like I'm hearing horror stories from the bedside, and I'm a little bit nervous, and as a leader, I'm sure that everyone's like past the point of panic to like now it's just throw your hands up and.
Oh, well, with that one, I like to flip it, right? I like to think, well, if other people applied the same criteria that you do to trust others, would they trust you? So are you actually worthy of their trust? Would they think that? Because when we make a decision to trust, we have a whole stack of criteria in our head based on stuff that we've experienced in our past, current state scenarios, context, all of these other things that we lump in to go, ooh, is it safe? So when we think in terms of, well, if everybody else applied the same criteria that we apply for us to decide, would we pass our own test? Quite often the answer is probably not.
No.
So that in itself can be very confronting. And when I do ask that question of executive, generally we brainstorm it and I get them to write a list. Okay, list out all of the things that it's going to take for you to be able to trust your staff. And off they go. They write down their list. And then when we get to the end, I go, right, now for the person who you want to trust most, who you most want to trust you, would you be able to tick off all of those things for them?
That's a clip. That's a breakthrough moment. I'm telling you, because that is a core issue right now, and I'm going to use that. Melanie. That is golden.
And
it's
and
practical.
Melanie, I wish I would have known you about 6 months ago when I taught my first leadership class to my emerging leaders, because that was a topic that we discussed. Exactly how you said it, but clearly not as eloquently as you said it.
You have to get her book, Noelle.
I can't wait. Because you have to think about, what is it about me? And if we don't have these moments of self-reflection as a leader, and you can't identify what is it about me that can either work with the team to change, or what is it about me that needs to change, you're going to have a hard time gaining that trust and ability within your staff. And also, as a leader, you always have leaders above you too. That puts you in a position of, if you yourself don't trust your executive team, it's very hard to then take those set of core values and instill it on your team, because they can see the difference. They can see the lack of alignment. And I've had that experience in the past. And I think that's where I'm so blessed and fortunate in my position now, is that, man, I feel like I won the lottery. I have not had a team the way that I have now, where the alignment from executive leadership to my nurse management team to the staff, that it's amazing. I think it really holds true to, don't be afraid to see where staff are coming from, take a risk with them. And it's okay to make mistakes, because we all do. And how are we going to learn from that? And one great, I think one great thing that came out of, my entire team is that they all started together. So it was the first time we did, as an organization, we all took a step back and really looked at what's needed for the team to do the work that they need to do to produce the outcomes we need to do. And it was figuring out how we need a certain level of managers in each department in this way to make this happen. And we started from scratch. We built them all up. They started into my leadership program that I taught. And man, it's transformational. And it's something I can say that you're not going to see it often in many other places, where you can actually start from a foundation building up. But it takes leaders like that to have that fundamental growth of, what is it about me, and how can I get my team to be where they want to be, and have me be where they want me to be. And you got to hold yourself accountable. You got to, I say to them, and it's every good leader should say that, as the expectations and the accountability that we have of them, they should have of us. And if I'm not doing a good job, I want somebody to tell me that as a staff, because what can we do differently? You have to have, there's a lot of strength and humility, and we've got to have more of that.
Okay, so I want to get Melissa's point, because I want you to come at it from a bedside nurse standpoint.
That's what I was going to say.
So
I have a couple of points. The first thing is really, as a bedside nurse, how do you, even if we're going to relate, we're going to connect as people. One of the things that as a leader you need to allow your staff to do is to be able to connect with themselves. Because they have to understand how they feel. They have to develop their own emotional intelligence, because without that, then they can't relate to you as a leader. And you have to create that space as a leader. You have to create the time to do it and the ability. I feel like there's a lot of surface level stuff that I see out there, like, oh, what's your core values? Repeat your core values. But if I no longer believe in my core values because my world has just been jacked up because of everything that's happening, and I don't even know what my core values are anymore, then how could I believe them? Then how it sounds very patronizing and, dismissive when they start being, oh, you should be grateful. Let's be grateful or gratitude. Like, that doesn't, gratitude and affirmations do not work unless you're in that space to accept and receive them. So I think that it's really important as leaders are going out to understand where your staff is. You need to take a pulse of the unit, right? You need to take a pulse and understand where the staff is. And then how do we support them to get where we need them to be, so that then we can connect. Because right now we're past the point of connecting, right? So the opportunity that Rollis's demographic really has is you've got a fresh person. You got somebody that's coming in fresh. So they are hopefully probably burnt out from healthcare if they have experience, but they're excited about this opportunity with your organization. So if you can create a space for them, that third space, right? If you can create a safe space for them to develop their own emotional intelligence, and develop their own core values, and understand how that directly relates vertically with your organization, then you've got buy-in, right? And then you're able to connect. The question I would ask Melanie is, when the staff comes to you and says, this is the major problem that we have that we need fixed, this is what we want, and you can't facilitate that. Like, the first thing that comes to mind for me is staffing, right? Yep. Safe staffing ratios is a huge problem right now because we just don't have the staff. And as a bedside nurse, I can tell you that there have been times where I was forced to take additional patients when it wasn't safe. And the nurse manager above me was like, there's nothing I can do. And her manager was, there's nothing I can do. And executive was like, sorry, we're still bringing people into the ER. There is no choice. We have to make money. And it was at the risk of my license, at the risk of the lives of the patients. And that's where a lot of hospitals and organizations are at right now. And I don't think that there's an easy solution to safe staffing ratios. And I wonder what would be something that leadership or even HR or whoever can do to kind of help when we know that there isn't an immediate solution. Like, what do you do? And lying is not lying.
Oh, no. You cannot hide from that. You cannot hide from that. And I've actually been in this position myself in that I've been in an area which was understaffed, it wasn't safe, and I wasn't able to immediately provide the fix. We didn't have the funding, we couldn't provide the extra stuff, and we knew that it was dangerous. And in that moment, I had to acknowledge, yeah, this is not great. This is actually a major risk. What would it take for you to feel more safe in this moment, to be able to create some safety in that immediate moment? But on top of that, we clearly need to put a business case together to be able to support more funding. So I at the time that I was working through that, I actually got the staff to help me pull together a business case in order for us to get more funding for more staff. So they were very heavily involved in, okay, I need you to tell me warts and all, everything that is risky, everything that you're scared about, everything that you're seeing that is potentially going to deregister all of us, because this isn't good. and we're going to put in a business case that cannot be ignored. So it was airing all of the things that weren't working, pulling them together into a brief that couldn't be ignored, and then requesting the funding that way. And did we get all of the funding that we asked for and all of the staff? No, we didn't, but we got some of it. And the power in that moment was the staff knew that I couldn't provide the immediate solution, but they also knew, because they were part of pulling the case together, that together we were trying our best to be able to get more people in for them to be able to resolve that. So that was the short term, the long term, and in the interim, in the medium term, we also looked at our processes and our practices. Are our operating procedures as safe as what they could be? Are there policies that need to be changed because they're old and they're no longer reflective of this model of care? Do we have equipment that's broken, and is the supply chain working as well as it should be? Melissa, you mentioned the lack of PPE a while back. So I'd be looking at those sorts of things, because staffing is one element, but the way that we work is part of a larger ecosystem. So I'd be looking at the entire ecosystem to say, well, where are the things that we can fix and we can tweak while we build a case to get staff on top of that. That would be my response, and that's what I've done in the past. And I'd be working with teams to be able to pull that together.
So we started a little bit late, but I want to be respectful of y'all's time. We're right at the top of the hour, so I don't know how much time we have left. If you want to just each of you go through what your final pieces of advice are, or you can tell me when your hard stop is. I'm a little bit flexible, so.
Noelle?
Noelle, what's your hard stop? You there?
So yeah, I'm here, and we can keep going if everyone else has time.
We can add another 5 minutes if everybody's good for that.
Sure.
You want to do that?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think Melissa had a question for you. Go ahead, Noelle.
Noelle, like,
Melissa.
what would be your advice for middle management? Because a lot of times, like, nursing management can't really make big adjustments. They could get together with their team, like Melanie's suggesting, and get the feedback and maybe even formulate a plan. But then what happens if the people above you won't budge or won't listen? Like, what do you have to do? How do you go back to your staff and, what do you do then?
So, wow, that's a great question. And, it's one that I take a deep breath and I pause, right, for a second to really think about, because I've been in those shoes before. And I'll tell you, they are in the toughest position that anyone in leadership can be in. And I can confidently say that, their heart and their passion is driven to be there to protect their staff.
Noelle has cut out, and I really get what she's saying. That middle management layer is absolutely the toughest position to be in, because if you don't have the support from the top, and if you don't have the trust from below, you really are in a really tricky scenario. And hopefully Noelle is coming back on now. So Noelle, I was just saying that that you're right. That middle management layer is definitely the hardest layer to work through, because you've got the pressures from the top as well as the pressures from the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Lost you guys. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's all right.
I would say, like, from a mindfulness and kind of, that's a little bit in my space. Like, how can we deal with things that we can't change, And I think that I would say the most important part is to identify what is really your fault and what you're capable of doing and what you can't, and then let go and set your boundaries. Really be firm about your boundaries, be firm about what you are accepting. If it's I hate to say this, but if it's a very toxic work environment and there's no signs that you can change it, be really cautious about what you're willing to sacrifice in order for people, for other people. And then, just hold on to your energy. Remember that your energy is sacred and you choose how you respond to any interaction, whether that's toxicity from below or above. And you get to decide what your response is. And I think that understanding that and having people that give you permission to say, that's not for me, is really important in that space. That's how, I survived. And, I was able to kind of block the things that I wanted to block and then receive the things that I chose to receive and work with what I could. And I was just very honest, I can't, that's not going to happen. But you know what? We're really creative and we're really smart. And I would love your input and your help. Is there a workaround? Nurses are, great at workarounds.
Yeah. And I'm sorry I got cut off and we lost a connection there, but I hope at least the beginning part you guys were able to hear.
Yes.
I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, okay.
But
it's a great question, but a tough one too, Melissa. They have the hardest. I think middle management has the toughest job right now.
Okay, so just to wrap this up, in the interest of time, this has been a great discussion, guys. You guys have been awesome today. I really appreciate having all you guys on. It's been a very, very engaging discussion. And it's one of those that I think that some folks just like to watch and they don't like to comment because it's like, who's watching? Who's watching me comment on this thing? So those brave ones who did comment, I want to applaud you for doing that. That was awesome. So just to wrap us up, what's the best way to contact each of you? And if you don't mind answering my quick little question as you tell us what's the best way to contact you, would you rather have the theme song of your choice play whenever you walk or have your own mood lighting wherever you are?
Theme song. Music is the spice of life and it is the soundtrack of everything.
I mean, I just want everyone else to hear what's going on in my brain.
I would agree with the music. The music will set off the energy and the light that's around you. So I would definitely have to agree with that.
As long as I can change it so people know what mood I'm in when I'm approaching.
There you go.
So you'll change the music, because it says the theme song of your choice wherever you walk.
Oh, there you go.
I'm a water sign, so we're always changing our mood.
Okay, all right. Well, very good. So best ways to contact you, Melissa, should they just do it through LinkedIn, go to your website? What do you want them to do?
Or my website, cortexenergysystems.org. I specialize in bedside stress management. How do we refuel our energy to make it through the day?
Okay, so Joanne, if you could put that in the chat to cortexenergysystems.com, is that right?
.org.
.org. cortexenergysystems.org. And Noelle, what's the best way to contact you?
So best way to contact me would be through LinkedIn. Here in my profile, you can send me a message or you can email me as well. That's also in my on my profile if you take a look.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on. And Melanie, I do have your website on the page here.
Yes, and you can also contact me via LinkedIn or melaniemarshall.com.au. And it's been a pleasure. Lots of fun. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's say bye to everyone, and then I'll let you know when we can cut off. But bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, someone else said bye. I love that. Tell them I said bye, too.
It's Rollis' number one fan.
Is it my friend Skylar? How are you doing, Skylar?
Hi, Rollis.
Welcome. Welcome to the show. Miss you.
Miss you too. Bye.
Okay, so bye-bye. So is it okay to cut it, Joanne? I want to make sure we get Skylar.
I thought my toddler
We're good now.
I thought
What's
my
that?
toddler was taking a nap, but in reality he had 3 ice cream sandwiches and passed out on the couch.